Welcome to Brave Inflections. My name is Claudelle. I am the founder of Brave Inflections. Thank you very much for visiting us and in particular exploring our services that we have on offer. In this video, I'm going to give you a little bit of a taste of what we cover in the topic leading through change and uncertainty. Like most of my topics, it could either be presented as a keynote, which would be very high level. It could be a workshop that I would work with the leadership, or it could also be a customized training program for the organization based on the organization's needs. So essentially sit with the leadership, get in a sense of what is needed, do an assessment, and then put a training package together around the core concepts that I cover in under this topic. And as with all my topics, they could be presented either online or face-to-face in each one of those three categories that I mentioned earlier. Leading through change and uncertainty, I think, is becoming even more important than it used to in the past. We live in the VUCA world, and for those of you who don't know what VUCA is, it's an acronym that stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I'm pretty sure that leadership in organization are starting to see that it is definitely becoming more of an issue, and leading through change and uncertainty is very different to leading through times of prosperity and where there is calmness and consistency. And that time is over. We're always going to find ourselves going through changes, and therefore it's important that we build that skill within the organization. But firstly, I think it's important that we understand the complexity of change. The organization needs to know what type of change it is dealing with, the velocity of the change, the direction of the change, the unpredictability that may come with the change, the uncertainty around the impact the change may have, you may have different types of change at the same time, and whether you've got the right resources allocated to each one of those projects that may create change, and a ripple effect throughout the organization, the risks around the change in terms of risk of failure, and then possible chain reactions. So it's important that we don't underestimate the complexity of change and be very, very clear in our minds about what kind of change we are dealing with and the impact and so forth. We also need to understand the factors that shape our reality. I've just mentioned a few here on this slide, such as globalization. These days, we're seeing much more of population nationalism and protectionism coming to the fore, the shifts in global economic power, changing consumer concerns and buying behavior, the evolving socio-economic and political context that the organization finds itself in, the shifts in global political power versus the shift in global economic power, and what does that mean for the organization, emerging technology, what impact that may have on the organization, increasing conversion and competition, pandemics. At the time of recording this video, we were sitting in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, resource constraints, broadening distribution, the tearing of the social fabric, climate change, a big issue, which would also lead to food and water scarcity, and then shifting regulation. Just to name about a few of the factors that organizations must understand that are shaping their reality. And there are a number of competencies that one needs to have in terms of leading people through change and uncertainty. And I'm just going to touch on a couple. The first is there must be a multidimensional view in the organization. Right? Oversight is really where the board is sitting and its committees. The board must be able to, in terms of the information that comes through to the board, hindsight, insight, foresight, very important. So we're talking about hindsight, the lessons learned. Do we understand the patterns that have led to where we are? Have we identified the gaps? Have we closed the gaps? Insight, that's the current situation where we're finding ourselves here, and Data mining becomes very important here, statistical analysis, dashboard and regular reporting, the weaknesses being identified and addressed, and then foresight. And so foresight is your ability to do an environmental scan, to see the dots, the emerging issues, to connect the dots, use predictive analytics and modeling so that you can put action plans in place. But also very importantly, leaders cannot have a one-dimensional view of the future, right? So we need to look at multiple potential futures and use scenario planning and look at whether the organization is in a state of readiness for each one of those potential scenarios that may play out. Another one that I think, a competency that I think is going to become much more important going forward, is to build purpose-driven organizations. And there's very clear signs in terms of where the workforce is, and especially the younger generation coming through, that purpose is very important. But how do you motivate people? How do you get everyone together to stick together and move in the same direction? Purpose right at the center of it. Leading with empathy, that is the ability to recognize that people react to change differently and being attuned to people's feelings, right? So do you have, as a leader, have an understanding of how the people are responding to the situation, and being sensitive to people's needs is very, very, very important. A key skill that I think is going to become part and parcel of how we lead. Business agility. So when we're talking about an organization's ability to maneuver through very, very complex situations and continuously changing situations, that means the business needs to be agile. And when we talk about agility, we talk about flexibility at the leadership level. We're talking about the agility of the people, flexibility within the workforce. A culture of responsiveness that has been cultivated, the alertness and the use of hindsight, insight, and foresight within the context of being agile. Whether your processes and policies enable agility within the organization, or whether it's making it very difficult for the organization to move fast when it needs to move fast. And then the structure and the infrastructure as well. Are those hindering factors, or are they enabling of an agile culture within the organization, right? And also important for leaders to understand is that leadership must go at a pace the majority can absorb, and that is not always an easy thing to determine. What is the right pace? Are we changing fast enough, or are we changing too slowly? Or we're changing too fast for the majority to absorb? Because if we're moving too fast for the majority to absorb, we may break the organization, right? And people start suffering from fatigue, and they start leaving the organization. If we're moving too slowly, our competitors may very well outpace us. Right, so a key question that we should be asking when we're looking at change and leading through change and uncertainty is, what seeds are we planting now? So to have a very clear view of what are we nurturing, what we're doing now, our actions, our decisions, what will they translate to in the future? How will they ripple? How will they affect our stakeholders? And important in the process to nurture our brands and to ask ourselves, what legacy will we leave behind for the next generation of leaders? That just gives you a taste about, in terms of what it is that we cover under this topic. Brave Inflections, what we do, strategic advice, and essentially that is mostly in the context of strategy formulation, taking people through change and uncertainty, and like I've covered bits and pieces in this video. Governance and building ethical organization. Also work with culture turnaround and do culture assessments, especially for the board that needs to understand that building an ethical culture is part of the board oversight responsibility, making sure that that happens. But the board needs to know what is going on. So culture assessments are important. Advising in culture turnaround strategies, building strong governance structures, and also whistleblower support, which is one of those things that a lot of organizations tend to overlook. We also do facilitation, and specifically in terms of strategy sessions, but also facilitating strategic conversations and helping leaders not to go into groupthink or not to sit in echo chambers, to think outside of the box and be able to reimagine their reality and reimagine the future. Training that would be customized, particularly to fit the organization's needs in the area of leadership, governance, and ethics. And those are the broad themes. And under those themes, there would be particular topics as well. I specialize in executive coaching, but particularly also in dealing with leaders who are at inflection points. And those are, they're going through transition and need to make very tough decisions. Also leaders who are groomed to be promoted. And the one that I also focus on quite a lot is coaching previously disadvantaged individuals who are being fast-tracked for senior positions. Keynote at conferences, and that can either be in person or online. My topics, and these are the broad themes with topics underneath them: building ethical cultures, leadership, ethical culture, courage, and also building strong, very strong themes. So with each one of these, we could customize, we mold it to suit the organization. So if you think that this is an area that your organization could do, where you can help, do with some help, where some intervention is needed, contact us and let's see how we can help you. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please go and have a look at the rest of Brave Inflection's website. There are a lot of different posts that I believe you may find helpful. I specifically focus on the leadership issues where tough conversations may be needed from time to time, but in particular to help leaders to go through those inflection points and to have those difficult conversations and to build courageous leaders and courageous organizations. Thank you very much for listening.